Dawn was still breaking over Normandy when German radios crackled with confidence. Engines warmed. Maps were unfolded. For a few tense hours, Berlin believed the war in the West could still be bent back into Germany's favor. At Mortain, victory felt close enough to touch. No one looking at the clear blue sky imagined that, within 7 hours, rockets would turn steel into fire and erase an entire armored dream. On the night of August 6, 1944, General Hans Eberbach stood near Mortain with one mission burned into his orders: strike west, cut through Avranches, and trap Patton's army. It was the biggest German counterattack since D-Day. Nearly 200 tanks. Tens of thousands of men. Panthers and Panzer IVs packed tight on narrow Norman roads, crews smoking, checking radios, joking quietly to hide the fear. If this worked, the Allied breakout could be strangled. Eberbach was no reckless officer. He had fought across Europe. He understood tanks, timing, and terrain. And he understood something else just as clearly: daylight was dangerous. The weather reports were bad news. Clear skies meant Allied aircraft. Fighter bombers. Rockets. Death from above. He warned his superiors. He pushed back. But the order came straight from Hitler himself. Attack at dawn. No delay. No retreat. At first, it seemed the gamble might work. As the sun rose on August 7, German columns pushed through Mortain streets and out into the countryside. American units were surprised. Some fell back fast. By early morning, German tanks had punched several kilometers forward. Radios buzzed with hopeful reports. The road to Avranches felt open. Then, at around 8:30 a.m., pilots high above Normandy saw the movement. British Typhoon fighters dropped their noses and began to dive. Their engines screamed as they fell out of the sky. German crews heard the sound before they saw the planes, a rising howl that meant only one thing: rockets. The first attack was fast and violent. Explosions slammed into the column. Vehicles burned. Tanks slewed off the road. Crews bailed out or froze inside their armor as shockwaves ripped through steel. The strike lasted minutes, but when it ended, the advance had stopped cold. Men scattered into hedgerows. Engines went silent. Smoke drifted across the fields. Eberbach received the first reports with a tight jaw. One air attack had frozen his spearhead. He looked back at the sky. Still clear. Still empty of clouds. And he knew this was only the beginning. Above Mortain, the Allies were waking up. Radios were already calling in targets. Airfields were already launching planes. What had started as a single strike was about to become a system, relentless, precise, and impossible to escape. By mid-morning, the German advance had transformed from a confident push into a desperate scramble. Every road west of Mortain became a death trap. Typhoons screamed over the fields, their rockets ripping through armor and sending columns of smoke skyward. Eberbach's tanks, once a tight formation, fanned out into the hedgerows, trying to hide. But every movement drew attention. Explosions erupted where engines were hit. Tracks were shredded. Crews were thrown from their vehicles or trapped inside. The Germans were fighting not just pilots, but an invisible system that seemed to anticipate every move. Forward observers with the American infantry fed coordinates to the RAF like clockwork. Every shift of a tank, every repositioning of artillery, was radioed within minutes. Precision strikes followed. Rockets hit tanks, trucks, and half-tracks alike. Each blast didn't just destroy, it paralyzed. Units stopped, radios crackled with confusion, commanders shouted impossible orders, and men ducked behind whatever cover they could find. Eberbach tried to push forward. Hitler's orders were clear: reach Avranches. But with every step, the road ahead melted into fire. By noon, the scale of the disaster became clear. German divisions had lost hundreds of vehicles. Tanks were destroyed or disabled faster than repair crews could respond. Softskin trucks carrying fuel, ammunition, and supplies went up in flames. Every strike created a ripple of chaos, halting the advance. The Luftwaffe, stationed miles back, could barely respond. Their fighters were too few, too far, and their pilots exhausted. Meanwhile, waves of Typhoons rotated in and out from nearby forward airfields, never giving German forces a moment to breathe. For General Eberbach, the morning had become a nightmare turned real. By early afternoon, 50% of his armored force was either destroyed or immobilized. Tanks that had survived initial strikes were stranded without fuel or ammunition. Infantry could not keep pace. Attempts to reorganize failed under constant rocket fire. Every advance was met by a storm from above. The German counterattack, meticulously planned and brimming with confidence, had ground to a halt in utter chaos. The skies above Mortain belonged entirely to the Allies. Over the course of the day, the RAF flew hundreds of sorties, firing thousands of rockets, dropping bombs, and striking with an efficiency no German commander could match. By 6 p.m., the German advance had barely moved 12 kilometers, less than a third of its objective. Out of 185 tanks, nearly two-thirds were destroyed or disabled. Dozens of trucks, half-tracks, and support vehicles lay in ruins across the countryside. Courage, discipline, and training could not overcome an opponent who had mastered the art of coordination, speed, and relentless firepower. The Battle of Mortain had become a brutal demonstration. The war could no longer be won on the battlefield alone. It was industrial capacity, coordination, and air supremacy that decided the day. Eberbach understood the truth. By nightfall, the dream of reversing the Allied breakout was gone, wiped away in just 7 hours. As dusk settled over Mortain, the full scope of destruction was impossible to ignore. Smoke curled from burning tanks and vehicles, painting the horizon in gray and orange. The fields were littered with steel bodies, and the roads that once promised victory were now death lanes. Eberbach surveyed the chaos from his command post, the weight of the day pressing on him. His 185 tanks had been reduced to barely 60 operational machines. Soldiers whispered among the wreckage, some shell-shocked, others furious, all knowing the offensive had failed. The German counterattack was over. The promise of encircling Patton's forces had evaporated under the relentless waves of Typhoons. Every attempt to regroup, every push forward, met the same answer: fire from above, explosions, and immobilized armor. Operational paralysis had replaced momentum. Supplies were gone, communications disrupted, and morale shattered. What remained of Panzer Group West was no longer an attacking force, it was a scattering of isolated units struggling to survive. In the aftermath, the numbers were staggering. 123 tanks destroyed or disabled. Over 400 support vehicles gone. Thousands of men faced casualties, disorganization, and the horrifying realization that their strength could not match the Allies' reach. It was not bravery or skill that had decided the battle. It was systems, coordination, and industrial might. RAF Typhoons, flying from forward airfields barely 35 kilometers away, had struck with precision impossible to counter. For every tank lost by the Allies, Germany had lost several. For every aircraft destroyed, the RAF could replace it in days. For Germany, replacement took weeks, a delay the battlefield could not forgive. Eberbach would live to see the war continue, but the failure at Mortain marked a turning point. His report to Army Group B would later state plainly, daylight armored operations without air superiority were suicide. The lesson was clear: the Allies' factories, their airfields, their coordination, all of it had already decided the war. Courage, skill, and tenacity mattered, but they were irrelevant against a force that could strike from above with unstoppable efficiency. The destruction of 175 tanks in 7 hours became a testament not just to Allied air power, but to an industrial system that Germany could not hope to match. Mortain was a battlefield lesson written in fire and steel: wars are not won on courage alone. They are won by those who can build more, replace faster, and sustain the fight longer than their enemy. On August 7, 1944, Germany's hope for victory was obliterated in just one day. The battlefield confirmed what the factories had already decided. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. Share your thoughts in the comments.